Welcome.
I'm Cameron Scott, one of the story architects of Star Wars The High Republic.
This is Dominic Pace, who plays Gekko the Bounty Hunter from The Mandalorian.
Hi, I'm Claudia Gray. I write Star Wars books.
And you're listening.
And you are listening
to Star Wars Comics in Canon. The Force is strong with this one.
Hello there and welcome to Star Wars Comics in Canon, your guide to the wider Star Wars canon through the comic book lens. And to take you on this journey, I'm your host, Mike Burton. And so brings episode 95. So then, my friends, we are here for another volume of the Poe Dameron comics. This week we are tackling the fourth volume of the comics, which are issues 20 to 25 and the first annual, and it is called Legend Found. Now, if you've not joined us before, make sure you go back and listen to the other 3 episodes I've done of Poe Dameron. Those are episodes 85, 89 and 91 of Star Wars Comics in Canon. But in short, I go through each of these comics, I give you the general plot details in sort of bullet point form so you get a general gist of what's going on. And then in amidst that, I give you some more information about certain species or characters or planets or trivia and things, just like an expanded view of the canon. So you can read your comics and then listen to the show, or you can listen to the show instead of reading the comics and still get a good idea. However you want to consume the comic content, be it all of it, none of it, or something in between, this podcast is specifically designed so it doesn't matter what you read, you still have a good idea of what's going on in the canon universe from the perspective of comics. So, with that in mind, let's get into some of the information about the comic before we delve into the narrative. So issue 20 was released October 2017, issue 25 was released March 2018, the annual number 1 was released June 2017, and the trade paperback collection with all of them was released May 2018. The writer of issues 20 to 25 is Charles Soule, the artist for those issues is Angel Unzueta, and the colour artist was Arif Prianto. For the annual itself, it was written by Robbie Thompson, the artist was Nicole Virella, and the colour artist was Jordan Boyd. Now, in the trade paperback, which is what I have, the annual is right at the very end of it, and I'm not quite sure why, because the end of the annual it says to be continued in Poe Dameron number 16, and Poe Dameron number 16 was the start of volume 3. So it's a bit peculiar they've put the annual that was released before any of these issues right at the end of this, instead of at the start, but also why Annual 1 wasn't in the trade paperback collection of Volume 3 of Poe Dameron, right at the start where it kind of should fit in the timeline. So I am leaving the annual to the end, just like it's in the trade paperback, but I thought I would flag that and just be like, yeah, I don't know why it's the 7th comic in these, but it is, and so just to clarify that. All of these comics take place between 32 years and 34 years after the Battle of Yavin. The Force Awakens takes place at 34 years after the Battle of Yavin. All of the Poe Dameron comics are set at some point within 2 years of The Force Awakens. In general, Star Wars are quite loose when it comes to certain timelines and things. But with that all in mind, let's get into the first issue of this batch, which is issue number 20. And let's start with The Crawl. Insidious forces are at work across the galaxy. Officially, the First Order and the New Republic are at peace, but a cold war wages in secret between them. General Leia Organa's brave resistance works to fend off the First Order's efforts on all fronts. To that end, Poe Dameron has been put in charge of Black Squadron, an elite team of X-Wing pilots. One of Black Squadron's ongoing missions has been to tracking down Lor San Tekka, believing the Explorer holds the key to finding Organa's missing brother, the Jedi and former rebel, Luke Skywalker. So Lor San Tekka is fairly central to the majority of these Poe Dameron comics, and that's obviously what we see his mission completion at the start of The Force Awakens when Poe manages to find him and things. I'll give a bit more bio information on Lor San Tekka a little bit later. So issue 20, it starts on the planet of Cato Neimoidia. Now, Cato Neimoidia is a colony world owned by the Neimoidians, and Neimoidians are species, you'd see them because they're in the prequels, they are the main antagonists in The Phantom Menace, more specifically Viceroy Newt Gunray, one of the leaders of the Trade Federation. He is the one who wanted Padme Amidala to sign that treaty and then wanted her killed and things. That guy, he's a Neimoidian. Now, Cato Neimoidia is actually in Revenge of the Sith. It's the planet in which Plo Koon dies. When you see the Order 66 montage and you see him get shot down, that's where it is. Cato Neimoidia also pops up in the Clone Wars a little bit and a few other bits and pieces, but one of the most recent pieces of canon content to be released as of recording this podcast was Brotherhood by Mike Chen, which came out I think in the last week or so, and the majority of that is actually based on Cato Neimoidia. And funnily enough, in Revenge of the Sith, there's a comment by Obi-Wan when he talks to Anakin, when Anakin says, "I've saved your, butt for the 17th time" or something, and Obi-Wan's like, no, 16 times. That business on Cato Neimoidia, that doesn't count. Well, that business on Cato Neimoidia is basically the story that we're getting in Mike Chen's Brotherhood, or at least part of it. And also on Cato Neimoidia, just a few bits of information about the planet itself. The main language is Pak, which is the native language of Neimoidians. It has breathable air and a persistent fog that's basically everywhere. And also it's primarily formed of bridge cities. So there's just lots of bridges in the sky and things. But yeah, that's a bit of information about Cato Neimoidia. So the issue itself starts on Cato Neimoidia and there's a tour going on. This person is telling the history of Cato Neimoidia and confirms that the planet is now being used for security. They have vaults that are incredible, and that's what the kind of planet relies on now, instead of being a part of the Trade Federation, which was disbanded once the Empire took over, which obviously at this point was around 60 years ago. So while this tour is going on, there is a hooded figure who sends out a few droids that goes into some sort of hatch, looks like an air duct, and then hides. This character is wearing a cloak that allows them to blend into the background a little bit, and then the rest of the tour continue going, and this hooded figure stays behind. They then sneak into a different room after coming to their droids, and the droids have knocked out the guards in this room, allow entrance to this hooded figure, and this figure gets to an artifact. Now, this artifact is called a Kazerath. It is a sphere crafted from both the light side of the Force and also the dark side of the Force. It's quite a unique item, and the individual who is after it wants to know more the history of a time where the light side and the dark side were balanced in harmony as opposed to being at war, which is obviously what we hear about quite a lot in both Legends and in canon. There's the Sith Wars, the Jedi and the Sith are always at each other's throats, and obviously the Sith are users of the dark side of the Force, while the Jedi are the users of the light side. But the individual who's trying to get this artifact is then captured, they are unhooded, and they are none other than Lor San Tekka. So Lor San Tekka, he's got this special cloak which lets him get through lasers and obviously helped him blend into the background as well slightly earlier on. We met him in The Force Awakens right at the very start, and then he gets killed by Kylo Ren. Bit of information about him. He was born before 22 years before the Battle of Yavin, so we know he's at least 56 years old around the time of The Force Awakens. He's a member of the Church of the Force, and he also appears in the Rise of Kylo Ren flashback. So there's a flashback within the comics, The Rise of Kylo Ren. And we know that Charles Soule, he loves the character of Lor San Tekka, which is one of the reasons why he's included him so heavily in the Poe Dameron comics, as well as including him in the Rise of Kylo Ren miniseries, as well as in his High Republic books. He includes information about the San Tekkas, which is the ancestors of Lor San Tekka. They were quite a powerful family when it came to hyperspace lanes and things. I think those and the Graphs were the ones who were responsible for the majority of hyperspace lanes known about in the galaxy and things, and for that travel. But yeah, so Lor San Tekka is captured because he broke into this vault and he was saying he wasn't trying to steal an artifact, he just wanted to see it, but obviously it looks like he was trying to steal it. So in the meantime, we've got Poe Dameron and BB-8 who are heading to Dakar, which is where the Resistance base is, and that's where we see it in The Force Awakens. BB-8 surprises Poe because he managed to repair Poe's personal X-Wing, the black one with the orange stripes on it. It's because BB-8 has made friends with an astromech droid called Ivy, and she did it for BB-8. Now, Ivy is a blue R-series astromech droid, so basically just like a bluish R2-D2, like slightly more blue and turquoisey it seems. Meanwhile, 3PO gets some news and is searching the base for Leia. He's kind of going through different places, and when he goes past certain places, that's when you get a smidge of story from each of these characters. So then it shows that Cara is speaking with Snap Wexley, and she wants to take a break from their relationship. She's worried about being distracted by it, and she says that they have to be like Jedi, try and put their emotions to one side and focus on things. Snap is not happy about this, but he does kind of agree to it and, walks off. Meanwhile, you've got Jess, or Jessica. Now, Jess is without any astromech droids because so many of them get destroyed on missions with her, and none of them want to go with her anymore because they're scared. She doesn't want to force them to go with her, but this means that she is a bit stuck. It then shows that Leia is talking to Statura once again, and he was mentioned in one of the prior volumes of Poe Dameron, so I won't delve into that again here, and she's concerned because the resistance is so small. They're trying to convince the galaxy of a threat that doesn't look like it's actually there, whereas when they were rebellion in the Empire, they'd already been under the thumb of the Empire for well over a decade, nearing 2 by the point of A New Hope, and also they could literally see the Empire causing problems, whereas the First Order did everything on the down low. And also Leia's worried because if they do one mistake, then it's all over for everyone, so they need some luck. 3PO then reaches Leia and confirms that his droid spies seem to have found Lor San Tekka's location, so she tells Black Squadron that they need to break him out of a Neimoidian prison. So that's where issue 20 ends, so let's move on to issue number 21. You've got Lor San Tekka in prison, and each baron of their palaces chooses the law within their own palace. So Baron Maccon is the baron of the palace that Lor San Tekka was trying to steal from, and he wants Lor San Tekka to be punished because it affects his reputation, and he may lose clients if it seems like his vaults aren't very secure. But he does tell Lor that he will have a trial. Then it shows that Leia lands on a different baron's platform, Baron Raya. Meanwhile, you've got Poe testing his ship, and Snap Wexley tags along. They fly through some ruins and things, and Snap tells Poe about Kara, and Poe says that it will all work out. Back to Leia, it shows that her shipment is some Naboo gowns that she got from her mum, Padme Amidala. She wants to see how secure they would be in these vaults, and joining her is Suralinda, Poe's friend. Then it shows that BB-8 is talking to Jess, who is having even more issues with her ship without an astromech droid. She's trying to patch in her nav computer and things, and then gets electrocuted a little bit, and then sparks start flying, and she's getting very frustrated. BB manages to get Ivy to help out Jess and become her astromech droid. Back to Cato Neimoidia, you've got Lor, who is pleading his case to Maccon. He says that he never wanted to steal that device, the Kazerath, he just wanted to look at it. And he's trying to say, look, I just want to study it and things, there's nothing, you can have it, I just want to see what it's all about. Maccon is not really listening to what Lor is saying, tells him that he's guilty and that he's going to solicit bids for Lor's execution, and then leaves the room. Raya is showing Leia around his vaults and things, and then an explosion happens. His droids then get shot, and then Maccon approaches with a squad of droids, proving that Raya's vaults aren't safe. Now the droids that both Raya and also Maccon have are B2 series super battle droids. You'll have seen them in the prequels, primarily in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. They're in Star Wars Battlefront and the Clone Wars quite a lot, but they are the sort of grey, chunkier ones that don't have the sort of long nose head. And they've got like wrist blasters and things. Now the reason that Maccon has done all these things is because he wants Leia's business. She then says fine, she wants her stuff to go to Maccon, but she's busy. She needs it to get done now. She doesn't have any time for drinks, she doesn't have time for tours or scans or anything like that. And Maccon says that's fine, we'll get your stuff straight into the vaults ASAP. And then the final panels of this comic show that Leia comes to Poe, telling him that it worked. So with that, we move on to issue 22. So issue 22 starts with a flashback. It's got a few flashbacks, but it's all relevant. The flashback is Leia telling Black Squadron about her plan to pull off this heist, and they need 3 things. So the first thing they need is dishonesty. Leia needs to be able to lie through her teeth about everything. Then it shows at present day, Leia's gowns are now in storage, and she is walking away from there while still talking to Maccon. An alarm sounds, and 3 starfighters approach the planet and then the facility. Maccon sends out a huge amount of ships. Now the ships that he sends out are common ships from the droid and separatist armies in the Clone Wars. They are called Variable Geometry Self-Propelled Battle Droid Mark 1. They are in the line of Vulture class series, so they're occasionally referred to as Vulture droids, but they are a droid starfighter. You see them primarily in Revenge of the Sith at the start, and you can see them, they're about 7-ish meters long when they're in flight, and they're about 3.5 meters when they're walking on land, which is a very bizarre thing to see, and they're just under 5 meters in width. Now the 3 ships that are, in air quotes, attacking the palace are members of Black Squadron. It's got Snap Wexley, Cara Kun, and Jessica Pava. Now while this is happening, Leia comms to Poe, who is inside one of the gown boxes with a breather mask. Poe climbs out of the vault quite easily. He manages to kind of hotwire inside the vault because Leia comments that the vaults are meant to stop people getting in, not people necessarily getting out. And 3PO manages to get the plans of the vault so they know all the layouts and things. So Poe climbs out, he climbs through essentially air ducts and things, and the detention level is just above the vaults. So Poe manages to get through, shoots a couple of droid guards, and then saves Lor San Tekka. Back planet side, you've got the droid ships are now trying to ram Black Squadron. Leia then gets the signal from Poe, and she tells Maccon that she wants to remove the gowns. Maccon is very angry about this, and says that she can never return to House Maccon. Black Squadron need to keep this distraction going, just so Leia can continue with her plan with Poe, and so Leia gets BB-8 to fly Poe Dameron's starfighter down to the planet. While this is all occurring, 2 hooded figures approach Leia's ship. They kill the guards, and also note that they get some vocal samples too. Back to Maccon and Leia, Maccon wants to charge Leia for the service. Even though her gowns have only been in the vaults for a number of hours, he still wants to charge her. Leia tells Soule to go and sort out the cargo being put onto the ship while she deals with this. So Poe then jumps out, and Lor San Tekka is still inside one of the gown boxes because that's where they've managed to hide him, and Poe wants to go and obviously help fight in his starship. So Poe gets near his X-Wing and it takes off without him. It's shown that BB-8 seems to have been shot, hence why he's not responding, and then Leia's ship takes off as well. It shows that Terex and Malarus of the First Order have taken them. And then there's also a flashback which shows that Leia mentions how much luck is an important role to play for a heist. And I mentioned at the start, Leia said there are 3 things that you need to pull off a heist. The first one was dishonesty, the second one was a man inside, which is when you get to see Poe in the gown box, and then the third one is luck. But with that in mind, we move on to issue 23. So it starts with Black Squadron are in a battle and they see Poe's X-Wing flying towards them. Poe tells Leia that it's not him, that someone's taking control of the ship, and that they need a ship to go and help. Maccon says that he can provide them a ship, but they need to pay for one. It shows that Malarus is in the X-Wing, and she injects her eye with that weird stuff that I've detailed in the prior issues of this, and then she's got like veins around her eye all sort of popping and things, and a small amount of blood is coming out of her eye. It's pretty harrowing, but obviously she's somewhat addicted to this stuff, and she feels like it makes her like peak human performance, so she keeps doing it. She then comes to Black Squadron and confirms that she is not Poe Dameron, that she's with the First Order. Leia is suspicious of who took these ships and is trying to work it out, and in the meantime Poe manages to get into one of the ships that Leia bought from Maccon. Shows that Terex is in Leia's ship, and he keeps zapping himself to stop the implant completely taking over his mind. He finds Lor San Tekka, who is actually concerned with Terex because he watches Terex zap himself in the head to stop the implants, and then it shows that Malarus is trying to destroy Black Squadron, but all of these droid ships are getting in the way. Poe then approaches in his ship, and him and Malarus kind of have a bit of a dogfight, they're flying around and things, and Malarus pulls a ridiculous maneuver which creates a huge amount of G-force, which Poe says you shouldn't be able to survive that. And it shows that she is now bleeding out of almost every orifice of her face, her mouth, her ears, her nose, her eyes. It's pretty horrendous. She's then about to shoot Poe, but BB-8 recovers from being shot and takes over controls of the ship. He then makes the ship take a nosedive, and Poe Dameron follows in his ship. BB-8 uses his cables to be able to clamp onto Poe's ship and get aboard, before Poe's ship then crashes. Malarus crash lands, but she survives. She is injured, but then Baron Maccon captures her. It shows that Poe and Black Squadron are safe, and Leia has got a tracker in with the gowns, so once Terex is out of hyperspace, they should know where he is. And the final panels of this comic show that Terex is communicating with Phasma, and he wants to trade the removal of his implants for Lor San Tekka. So we move on to issue 24. Poe is aboard the ship called the Raddus. Now, the Raddus is a ship, it's a Mon Calamari ship, it is an MC-85 Star Cruiser, and it's named after Raddus, who is a main Mon Calamari general from Rogue One. The Raddus appears in The Last Jedi. You see Holdo perform the Holdo maneuver when she uses hyperspace and basically rams into the First Order ships and things, and the ship itself is around 3.5 kilometers long, which is around 11,000 foot. But back to the story. So Poe is looking at his broken X-Wing aboard the Raddus. He's with BB-8 and Ivy won't help them again because it's only been moments since Ivy helped them out. Leia then calls over Black Squadron and tells them to get ready. She wants them to be in the air, ready and waiting, that as soon as the tracker from the ship activates and they know where Terex is, she wants them to go and get her gowns back and obviously get Lor San Tekka. On the ship itself, Terex throws Leia's gowns away in hyperspace. He just ejects them and confirms that no one will ever get them. He doesn't know there's a tracker in them, he's just kind of mad at Leia. Terex then continues to shock his implant, and Lor questions him a little bit. They have a bit of a back and forth and things, and then Terex makes the comment that he actually likes Lor San Tekka. It's almost a pity he has to get rid of him. Black Squadron are in the X-Wings just kind of waiting around. Snap comms to Kara, they have a little chat and things, and then Terex's ship comes out of hyperspace and lands on a First Order cruiser, which is the Absolution. Now, the Absolution appears in the book Phasma, and it is also mentioned in the Galaxy's Edge book Black Spire Outpost. It's a Resurgent class Star Destroyer. It's nearly 3 kilometers long, about 10,000 foot, and was owned by the Cardinal and then by Phasma. If you want to know more about that kind of storyline, who the Cardinal is and those sort of things, read the Phasma book. So Terex shocks himself and then comes down to speak with Phasma. He doesn't have Lor San Tekka with him, and he stabs himself with this concoction which was made by Malarus, and he needs an antidote or he will die. He confirms that either they can torture him and he'll die before he gives over the information, or they can get the implants removed, which won't take long. He can then inject himself with the correct antidote, and then he will lead them to Lor San Tekka. Phasma's impressed by this, and they go off to get his implants removed. Back with Black Squadron, Jess and Ivy work out that Terex won't have enough fuel to stay in hyperspace for much longer. He may have ditched the tracker, or the ship may have been destroyed, they're not too sure, but Jess is warning that this time is coming. Terex's implant gets removed, and then Phasma just lets him go so he can go get his antidote, and he also requests some First Order armor. Then after a bit more waiting, Jess then says to Poe that it's past the point, it's actually quite a bit further on. The ship, there's no way it would have this much fuel to be able to stay in hyperspace for this amount of time, so the ship's either destroyed or the tracker is gone. So Black Squadron go and talk to Leia. Leia confirms that she won't give up, and then a transmission comes in for Poe, and it is actually Terex. He managed to crack the resistant codes ages ago and has been using them for intel to give to the First Order, but he didn't tell the First Order he cracked the resistant codes, so they don't need to worry about that. But he's given the First Order the location of Lor San Tekka. He's also going to give it to the Resistance in the hopes that both sides will essentially destroy themselves. And then the final panel of this comic shows that Lor San Tekka is in a spacesuit just floating there waiting. So this leads on to the final issue of this arc, but the penultimate issue of this batch, issue number 25. You've got Lor San Tekka, who is floating by himself, and he decides to record what he calls his last words. Now, we know that's not the case because he appears in Force Awakens, which is set after this, but still, drama is fun, isn't it? But I'm going to read a little bit of what he says because I just think it's quite interesting. I like hearing Lor San Tekka's perspective on the Force and those sort of things. So here's a bit of dialogue. I must begin by admitting that I cannot touch the Force, I can only study it, and so all of my conclusions might be wrong. But I think in some ways that distance has helped me move toward understanding. I see the Force differently than a Jedi might. Even if I cannot touch it, I can certainly say that the Force touches me, as it does with all beings. It moves like a sea. It has tides. Sometimes it recedes from the galaxy and its influence can barely be felt. And then it rushes back and the great certainties become uncertain and all is change. It is as if, when the Force is prominent, those who seize it can reshape the galaxy as they choose. I believe we are about to re-enter such a period now. Force-related sites across the galaxy have become active, expectant. Something is coming. Light and dark will battle yet again. And I have lived long enough to know that either side can win. So I just thought that was a nice perspective from Lor San Tekka. He is a very interesting character, and it would be cool to hear more about him and things. I think we're going to get a bit more of him potentially in Shadows of the Sith, the book, which is when Luke and Lando go off and try and find Force artifacts. I imagine part of that will have Lor San Tekka appearing in it, but we shall see. So in the story, we've got Poe and Black Squadron are searching for Lor San Tekka in this nebula. They manage to find him and they send out a ship to go out with 3 tethered spacesuits, so, attached by ropes in essence. As the people reach Lor, the ship with the tethers is blown up by the First Order, so the 4 spacesuits, the 3 that went to get Lor and also Lor himself, get blown away. Kare and Snap then have a moment, and it shows that the stormtroopers grab Lor San Tekka. And it's worth noting here that these stormtroopers that grab Lor San Tekka, they have jetpacks, which further evidences that line of dialogue in The Rise of Skywalker which says, they have jetpacks now, is even more stupid, because Poe has literally seen stormtroopers with jetpacks, and also it's been seen in the Empire days in canon there are stormtroopers with jetpacks, and in the Clone Wars obviously there are people with jetpacks. I don't know why they were like, oh, they have jetpacks now when they were talking about the First Order stormtroopers. It was a stupid line, and it doesn't connect with any of the other content, and it just further evidences some of the issues I have with The Rise of Skywalker. But this is not me trying to complain about The Rise of Skywalker, that's not what this podcast is about, trying to be positive and things. So, back to the comic. Those stormtroopers with jetpacks grab Lor San Tekka, and then Poe has a plan to move them. He gets Black Squadron to focus all fire on the nearby First Order cruiser, and they fire into one spot. The deflector shields are active, and you can see that, but they eventually shoot enough to get a very small hole in the shield. Poe then fires on a specific conduit on the ship, because 3PO and his spies found a weakness of the First Order vessel. The ship is somewhat disabled, but a rogue shot hits Jess's ship. She is hit and her systems are down, and then a rogue missile is coming towards her. Ivy says it is not her fault, and before she can realise what Ivy is doing, Ivy launches herself out of the ship at the missile, and then saves Jess's life. But BB-8 sees it and is quite sad. The retrieval squad managed to kill the stormtroopers with the jetpacks and get Lor San Tekka. So the mission was a success, and it shows later on at the Resistance base on Dakar that Lor meets up with Leia. They have a conversation, she wants Luke's location, and Lor comments that as the galaxy moves towards war, the Skywalkers are always at the heart of it, so he suspected she would ask him of that information. Lor says he doesn't know exactly where Luke is at the moment, but he can find out. So Leia agrees to give him a ship so he can go find this information out, and then he will communicate to the Resistance and they'll be able to go find Luke. Meanwhile, Jess speaks to BB-8. She gives him a little microchip that Ivy seemingly left in her little astromech port on the ship. Ivy said that it's not Jess's or BB-8's fault of what happened. And BB-8 happily takes the little chip and then goes and plonks it in Poe's X-Wing, which is a really nice thought, but it also makes me kind of sad because obviously Poe loses his ship in The Last Jedi, so BB-8 would probably have lost that little chip. Hopefully BB-8 kept it out and kept it with him, who knows. Snap and then Cara have a little talk, and then the next panel shows them getting married, so they resolved all their problems and things. Then the final panels of issue 25 show that Lor San Tekka is talking to Poe Dameron before he leaves. He says that Luke and people with lightsabers who control the galaxy aren't everything. We need to focus on other things. Focus on the lights, and he points down to people celebrating the marriage of Snap and Cara. Lor notes that there's the big void out there in space, but you need to focus on the lights. And then him and Poe have a discussion, and it's confirmed that the Force is all of us. It's more than just being this power or being the thing that binds people together. People are the Force. And then Lor leaves and says, "May the Force be with you." And that's where issue 25 ends. So that's the main sort of story there. I mean, there is going to be another volume of Poe Dameron that I'm tackling in a couple weeks' time. But then we move on to Annual Number 1. And as a reminder, this was released in June 2017, so it was released a few months before issue 20 was. Annual Number 1 is set before issue number 16 of the Poe Dameron comics, and it is set just after La'ulo Lampard died. So there's a couple of flashbacks in this. It shows then Leia was warning Poe about his recklessness, and then now you've got Poe and BB-8 floating in space in his spacesuit, and BB-8's just floating with him, and they're in a minefield that had been left there by the Empire years ago. Poe was pursuing a distress call, and it went against Leia's advice because Leia says don't just go for any random distress call that we can't identify, that we don't know what it is. But obviously Poe went anyway. BB-8 grabs Poe with those cables that he often uses, and then Poe decides to shoot one of the mines in the distance to hopefully create enough force to propel them towards this broken ship that's nearby them, where the distress call is still coming out of it, but it is very faint. So the explosion causes Poe and BB-8 to fly past the wrecked ship, and BB manages to shoot out another cable and catch the edge of it. They then use this outside keypad to get into the ship. Poe approaches this hangar and he looks out and sees a lot of First Order troopers. He manages to leave the area before they see him, but one of the troopers does look and seems a bit suspect. Another flashback, you've got Poe who is apologising to Leia once again after he apologised in that first flashback, and she confirms that the Resistance is bigger than one person and he needs to try and focus and not go off by himself all the time. So back to present day, you've got that stormtrooper who's a little bit suspect who went up to the balcony that Poe looked over to try and find out what was going on. He manages to find Poe, but then is surprised by BB-8 swinging down and cracking him in the face. Poe manages to grab the stormtrooper's gun and then cracks him in the head again and manages to KO the stormtrooper. And Poe wants to figure out what the First Order are actually doing out here. So Poe and BB manage to sort out a diversion, so some stormtroopers who are guarding the cargo leave that area, and Poe manages to find out that the First Order are smuggling weapons and explosives to peaceful worlds. So Poe wants to report this back to Leia, so Poe and BB-8 manage to find an escape pod. So Poe gets BB-8, the intel and the explosives, onto the escape pod, but then the First Order troopers start to approach. They start to shoot him, so Poe just tells BB-8 to go without him. He closes the hatch and lets the escape pod fire off into the distance as Poe dives into cover. Then in the hangar there is a big explosion, and it shows the Black Squadron have appeared to help out Poe. They managed to shoot the First Order troopers and save Poe's life. Then the final panels of this annual show that he reports back to Leia. She says, you shouldn't have done this, you went by yourself, you did all these things. However, in doing so, you actually really helped out the galaxy. You managed to stop the First Order from supplying these things to these worlds. And also notes that he is learning because BB-8 told Leia about how Poe was going to sacrifice himself to get intel to the First Order. So she says that he is learning, which is a good thing, but obviously he needs to be less reckless. And then the final panels of this comic show that the intel confirms that Terex is alive, and he's the one that is either formulating this plan that the First Order have, or he's involved in some way. And obviously at this point, they thought that Terex was dead. So, this annual would have been good in the previous trade paperback collection. I don't know why it was included in this one, maybe due to time constraints or something, but it would have actually been a really cool prequel to issue number 16. And obviously with these Poe Dameron comics, I'm reading them as and when, because it's one of the only Star Wars comics that I've got that I didn't read loads of in advance and then decided to do Star Wars comics in canon like I did with the majority of these comics that I've now tackled. It has been reading them on the week of me recording this episode. But that's enough, my friends. That is the Poe Dameron Comics volume number 4. We've only got one more volume to go, which is issues 26 to 31, and also the second annual of Poe Dameron. I've not read any of these. I assume Terex is going to be the antagonist in it, and it's going to lead into The Force Awakens, but I just don't know. I could have looked it up, but I haven't. So what have we got coming up for the future of Star Wars comics in canon? Well, next week I'm hoping to do the Trail of Shadows mini-series from the High Republic era, and that will be from Phase 1 of the High Republic still, and that will mean once I have done that, as well as the 2 remaining book reviews, and then the 2 Edge of Balance manga, then it means I'll have tackled all of the High Republic Phase 1 content, apart from like a few drips and drabs here and there, which will mean that for October, I'll be in good stead to start the whole process again when we get to Phase 2. But aside from that, I think that probably the week after that I may end up finishing this run of Poe Dameron comics just to kind of get them finished in essence, and then it means I've done all of those things and I'm near enough fully up to date with all Marvel Star Wars comics. Then after that, I'm going to be tackling the Crimson Reign batches of comics. So obviously I think maybe a couple months ago now, there was the War of the Bounty Hunters big crossover event where you had the 2020 runs of Dr. Aphra, Bounty Hunters, Star Wars, and Darth Vader all crossing over, along with a mini-series called War of the Bounty Hunters, as well as some companion comics about individual characters, which were War of the Bounty Hunters, Jabba the Hutt, IG-88, those sorts of things. So Charles Soule, who's kind of the architect of War of the Bounty Hunters and this whole crossover event, he has confirmed there's going to be a trilogy. So the first batch is War of the Bounty Hunters, the second batch is Crimson Reign, and then the third batch is to be confirmed. So Crimson Reign is going to continue on the story of War of the Bounty Hunters, and I'm probably going to do each episode where each episode will be different comics. So episode 1 will be, this issue of Dr. Aphra, then Vader, Star Wars, Bounty Hunters, and then also the Crimson Reign mini-series issue itself. There don't appear to be any Crimson Reign companion comics, so that makes my job a little bit easier, but that is generally what I'm going to aim for going forward, as well as intertwine the book reviews, and then I've also got some IDW publishing comics to tackle as well, and I will clarify that over the coming weeks I'm going to be doing the Kenobi discussion show, so it's going to be myself and a different guest or guests each week talking about the episodes of Kenobi. Now, the first episode I will be doing, I should be recording that on the Friday when the first 2 episodes drop, and then there'll be 4 more episodes after that. There are 6 episodes in total. So I'm hoping to get various members of Comics in Motion involved, like I did with the Book of Boba Fett discussion show, and it should be a really, really enjoyable experience, but I will pre-warn people here that because I'm going to be doing genuine Chit-Chat, the Kenobi show, my Patreon stuff, and also Star Wars Comics in Canon, I may end up having, and also I'm busy, I've recently bought a house, and there's loads of things that are going on with that, and also I've got trips to Oxford and gigs and other stuff. I may end up not being able to fully do an episode of Star Wars Comics in Canon every week while I'm doing all those things. I will try my best, but we shall see about that. Maybe I'll release like a Patreon thing on here, I don't know, but I do want to pre-warn yourselves of those things. In addition to that, what else have I got coming up? What am I involved in? Well, I appeared in a recent episode of Star Wars Timeline. That's my friend Ben, who has a YouTube channel called Star Wars Timeline. I've appeared on there many, many times. I've done accents in Star Wars. We've tackled each of the trilogies. And also we have done a villains conversation about the villains of each of the trilogies, how they compare with each other and in amidst themselves in the trilogy, but also how villains compare in general outside of the Star Wars universe. But bouncing off of that and connecting with the Kenobi show that I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be releasing very shortly, it might even be this weekend, my discussion with Ben on Genuine Chit-Chat. And that is going to be about Kenobi. So we talk about Kenobi as a character, we talk about our hopes for the Kenobi series, we talk about a little bit of the canon and Legends content that Kenobi's been involved with and how they may potentially affect the show. So there's lots of just stuff. It's like a pre-show to my Kenobi discussion talk. So if you want to check that out, make sure you subscribe to Genuine Chit-Chat. It's on its own podcasting feed, or subscribe to my YouTube channel. We can use a few more subscribers and I can pass 100 and change the channel link name. And in there, there's all my Star Wars comics and canon episodes. There's all my Genuine Chit-Chat episodes, and a lot of those have got video as well. I've spoken to Cavan Scott and Claudia Gray and Alex Molly of Star Wars Explained. Dominic Pace, who is in Series 1 of The Mandalorian, Paolo Villanelli, who's a comic book artist and is actually doing the artwork for the Bounty Hunters comics that I referenced earlier that are in the War of the Bounty Hunters and are also in Crimson Reign. So lots of people involved with Star Wars if you want to check those out. But also I've spoken to loads of people that have nothing to do with Star Wars at all. Loads of people who've either written stuff or authors or comic book artists, things like that. I've musicians and artists, people who like to travel, podcasters, psychologists, scientists, all kinds of different people about a wide variety of topics. So if you haven't checked out Genuine Chit-Chat, please go and subscribe to the YouTube channel so you've got all that content in one. There's also loads of playlists, so if you want to just hear conversations about religion and spirituality, you can check that out. If you just want to hear conversations that are all about Star Wars, there's those. If you want to just check out episodes of Star Wars comics and canon, all set in the sequel trilogy era, or all of my High Republic episodes, all of those are in playlists. So make sure you check those out. But aside from that, my friend, the only other thing to plug is my Patreon, patreon.com/genuinechitchat. If you go over there and contribute as little as £1 a month, you get access to an audio exclusive feed with content you can't get anywhere else. There's Star Wars book reviews on there. I've been tackling some Legends content, so I've done a Darth Bane book review of the first one. I've done Darth Plagueis and Shatterpoint, and I've also done some canon content that I haven't released on here. So I've done the book A New Dawn, which is a prequel to Rebels. I've done A Last Shot, which is written by Daniel Jose Older and is set after the events of Return of the Jedi. And I've also done Dark Disciple, which was by Christy Golden, and that is made from unused Clone Wars episodes. That's about Asajj Ventress and Quinlan Vos. And so I do, generally speaking, what I do on this channel, I give my spoiler-free review thoughts, and then I slowly kind of delve more into spoilery territory, and then at the end I give just a brief overview of the plot itself, which includes spoilers. They're not as structured or as long as the ones that I release on this main feed that I do for the High Republic books, but they are still worth a listen. I've had some really good feedback on them. So if you want to hear my thoughts on some Legend stuff and some canon content that is not High Republic and comic related, then please consider checking out my Patreon. As I said, it's only £1 a month, and as well as that, you get access to loads of other things. There's at least one episode of Afterthoughts I release on there every single week, which is either myself doing one of those reviews I spoke of, or it's me and Megan talking about movies or TV series and things like that we have recently watched. But that is going to be enough from me, my friends. Please follow me on social media at Genuine Chit-Chat. Please review Genuine Chit-Chat and the feed of Comics in Motion, both on Good Pods and Spotify and Apple Podcasts, places like that. Share this with your friends, tell people about the show, and please consider checking out my Patreon page. But thank you so much for listening, as always, my friends. I appreciate all of you listening all the way up to the very end. And, as always, may the Force be with you. The intro for Star Wars Comics and Canon is arranged by myself, Mike Burton, and the backing music was made by Eric Matias of soundimage.org.
You have just experienced host, creator, everything elser of Genuine Chit-Chat, and also the host and creator of Star Wars Comics and Canon, found on the Comics in Motion podcast, Mike Burton.